Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and please a very warm welcome to everyone who's joining us now today for the wonderful and a very different session that we have today at World Dental Association. I hope all of you are safe, all of you are doing good, and taking all good care of yourself. So today we have a very relevant and a very important topic for us. We have one of the best in the business, Dr. Sitesh Roy, sir, who is joining us from Mumbai. I have had the pleasure to listen to Sir way back in 2012 when he had come to GDC Mumbai to talk about immunology and allergies. And I was mesmerized by the way Sir had delivered his session and the amazing knowledge that he has. He is an amazing person. I have a long list of his achievements and his introduction. I'll just try to breeze through it because obviously we have to take use the maximum time that we have with him to get out maximum knowledge from him. So Dr. Sitesh Roy, he did his MBBS degree from GS Medical College in Mumbai in the year 1996. Then he completed his residency in pediatrics from the University of Illinois, Chicago in 2000. He went on to complete his fellowship in allergy and immunology at the National Jewish Medical Research Center of the University of Colorado. He has been associated with a lot of other wonderful institutions where he was the senior consultant, like, for example, in the Columbia Asthma and Allergy Clinic in Vancouver, Washington. He then returned back to Mumbai in 2011, where he now has his practice in Bandra. Just to give a gist of it, he is also the diplomate of the American Board of Allergy and Immunology. All things said and done, the bottom line, I guess this is the best introduction that you can have for him. He was listed in the best doctors in America in the year 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, and again in 2011, 2012. So more than a hat trick of being amongst the best doctors in the US, as well also in the Guide to America's Top Physicians in the same time span from 2005 to 2010. So I guess this is, you know, the icing on the cake to have Dr. Sitesh Roy sir talking about the most important thing I feel, which is, making ourselves more strong, more immune so that we can fight off this pandemic that we have with us. Can I please invite Dr. Sitesh Roy sir, please, on the screen?
Thank you very much, Anand, for that very
Good
kind.
afternoon, sir. Good evening, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you very much, Anand, for the very kind introduction. It's my pleasure to be with you all again.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot, sir. It's an honor to have you, and it is very nice to meet you again after so many years.
Great. Same here.
So, sir, let's start. I guess I'll just kick off. Since this topic is a bit offbeat, something at least we don't do in clinic for us every time. Maybe we read a bit about immunology in your second year of BDS, and now we might have forgotten most of it. So maybe a bit of basics to start with. What is the role of the immune system in health and disease, sir? How would you put across what does the immune system exactly do? How is it important to us?
So, if I have to summarize a very intricate, a very fascinating, and a very extensive system of our body, which is relevant in health and disease, in one line, I would say that the immune system differentiates between self and non-self. This is a one-line answer to what the immune system does. So to give you an example, the immune system tells us that this is my skin, but the fungus on it is not mine. The immune system will tell us that the dental pulp is mine, but the caries bacteria trying to get into it is not mine. The immune system would tell us that this bone is mine, but this virus that is trying to get into my body is not mine. And in order to do that, it has a lot of different steps, a lot of different mechanisms, what we call the innate immunity, which is our first line defense, which can literally fight off anything. You take a virus, a bacteria, a parasite, a fungus, a cancer cell for that matter, our innate immune system is very smartly able to ward everything off. And for the things that the innate immune system can't handle, then we have something called an adaptive immune system. So the adaptive immune system kicks in a little later, maybe in 3-4 days after the innate immune system has started its work, starts peaking around a week to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then really takes over the whole battle, as you can say. And there are a variety of different cells in both of these, but the ones that are very relevant, because we are talking a viral infection, in the first phase are something called natural killer cells. There's something called macrophages, dendritic cells, Langerhans cells. And there's obviously our mucosal barriers, our nose, our respiratory tract, our GI tract, which has fantastic natural immune, antitoxin, antimicrobial substances that really ward off infection. And when the problem goes further in the adaptive system, it's the T cells and the B cells which start making the specific antibodies and the specific, what we call cytotoxic or killer cells. And the way this is relevant is when this whole immune system, which is orchestrated by a group of what we call regulatory cytokines and cells, goes haywire. If it goes against ourselves, we get autoimmune disease, which, you know, there are myriad manifestations even in dental practice of autoimmune diseases and in the whole body, as you can say. And when that immune system is overwhelmed by an infection is when we get something like what we would see in the 3-4% of patients who are really dying from COVID-19 infections worldwide, or getting a cytokine storm where their regulation is not working. And that's what is leading to multi-organ damage and death. So whether you take a simple infection or you take a heart disease or you take cancer, the immune system is at the core of every single thing that we live, breathe, survive. And this fascinating system is controlled by so many different factors that even in second year MBBS, like you said, in microbiology is when we get to read about the immune system. I was so fascinated by it that when I chose allergy immunology as my super specialization, the primary reason to do that was because I was amazed at the plasticity of the immune system. That how can it go from within seconds, minutes, hours, and days deciding that something is good or bad. So in a very small gist, self
It's a
from
very flexible system.
what the immune system does.
Okay. So, so how do we develop this immunity? How do I get it?
So again,
how do I get immune to something? How does it happen actually?
So most people would believe that immunity is something that you get after you're born, when in reality, you start becoming immune from when you're in your mother's womb. That's when you start developing your immune system. So what your eats, what your mother drinks, what your mother thinks, what your mother feels, the emotions that your mother experiences, everything starts influencing the fetus's immune system when it is developing from around the 10th, 12th week onwards in utero. And there are many diseases that now we connect to the intrauterine environment when they manifest later in life. It's a fascinating field. Now, once the baby is being born, that's where the external immune training begins. The external immune training begins right from deciding whether the baby is born by a normal vaginal delivery or the baby is born by cesarean section.
Okay.
Because when the baby is born through the mother's vaginal canal, there are a lot of different bacteria, fungi, many things that the baby actually swallows as it, and it starts colonizing their gut. Wow. And there are significant differences that are seen between a baby born through a normal delivery versus a baby born through C-section. And from there on, you can understand from what I just said, wow, everything that goes into the baby's mouth, including what goes into your mouth, Anand, right now decides what your immune system is going to be. Because in our gut is where 70% of our immune system resides. Whether it is the early training where the cells get what they have to get and circulate through the lymph nodes, use the cells from the thymus, which is the T cells, make the antibodies, which is the B cells. We start differentiating from very early in life what is us, what is not us. And as we grow older, the food we eat, the air we breathe, okay, the stress we take, the tension we take, the worry we take, okay, all the kind of anxiety that we may go through, everything determines how our immune system is going to be. So our immune system is a conglomerate, a combination of everything that we do as human beings, right from mind, body, and spirit. That's at least how I, as an immunologist, have come to see, because I know that the tests and the investigations don't have all the answers. And for every single disease, you will see that there is a component that is related to mind, psyche, whatever you want to call it. And then there is a section that is related to actually what physically is happening to us, what our genes are. And I can't ignore the genetic makeup of a person also, because the genes also determine how our immune system will function. So if we are born with certain what are called micro deficiencies in the immune system, people are actually suspecting it with COVID-19 infections. They may have some very subtle micro monofunction defects that may make them more prone to infection. And it's certainly been known in primary and secondary immune deficiencies that have been known for a very long time. So, and as a person ages, immune system goes through something called immune senescence. And that immune senescence is one of the reasons why people above the age of 60 are most severely affected by COVID-19 infections. Whereas people younger who have a more young, flexible immune system are not that severely affected. And as the number of diseases add up, hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, COPD, asthma, you add up more and more cancer, immunocompromised state, the person becomes more and more severely affected by COVID-19 if they catch the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So that in short is how the immune system gets trained. Anything that we eat, drink, inhale, our cells, our immune, what we call antigen presenting cells, take it through a very well-defined pathway that God or whatever you believe in has given to us. And it trains us that this is good, this is not good. This is self, this is not self. And that's why those who have a strong innate immunity are the ones who are in the 80% who don't get much symptoms when they get a SARS-CoV-2 infection. I hope that answers your question.
Amazing. I didn't know the immunity is so. Yes, it more than answers it. It actually is amazed me. I never knew that our brain has so much control on our immunity. I thought it's a totally separate procedure, a totally separate process. I didn't know it's so interrelated.
In the field of immunology, we have fascinating studies. We took medical students who were giving exams, and we took medical students who were their vacation period or just doing their normal studies. And we checked their innate immune responses. The innate immune responses of all the young guys and girls who were going through their medical examinations were 30 to 50% lower than when they were not stressed and just happy-go-lucky.
Well, maybe now I realize why I used to get the pericoronitis or issues with my third molars only when I had exams. So
there's a
every time
connection with dental disease also.
That used to swell up. Yes. So
absolutely right. Head to toe.
I knocked off that tooth. That's different. Yeah. So I had that issue way back in 2012, and I have the answer now. Thanks a lot, sir. So I guess, I will invite Dr. Sanyogita, ma'am. Yes, sir.
I was saying we live, we learn.
You were saying something, sir.
We live, we learn.
Yeah. And there's always a lot to learn from you. That is for sure.
Thank you.
I'll invite Dr. Sanyogita Shah. Dr. Sanyogita is a senior practitioner in Mumbai and a very, very good friend of mine and knows Dr. Sitesh sir also very well. Dr. Sanyogita, please ask your question. Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you. Thank you for coming on the stage and enlightening us. And sir, we had many questions which will come along. But right now, as you said, what I got is that our immunity can fight COVID-19, right? But how do we come to know whether we are in that immunodeficiency phase? Like you said, ki some are immunodeficient. Or is there any test which can tell us whether we are immunodeficient or did we counteract COVID-19? Are these tests legitimate? And yes, you can answer that. Then I'll go further.
Sure. Yeah. Firstly, thank you, Sanyogita, for inviting me to this wonderful forum with so many thousands of dentists and dental assistants and hygienists across the globe. It's a fascinating thing. And I really want to thank you for that. Coming to your question. So our innate immune system should be more than capable of handling any virus. You throw anything at it, if it's working well, between it and the adaptive immune system, we should be able to fight anything. Now, unfortunately, as the word immunity becomes more and more popular, there are a lot of labs that have started saying that we have this immune panel that you can do and check if your immunity is okay. Now, this panel generally is not something that you can really test every part of your immune system with. What they do generally in these panels is they will give you a CBC to know what your different white cell counts are. Do you have a lymphopenia, neutropenia, or a eosinophilia? They will look at whether you're anemic and tell you, because we know when we are anemic, we are more prone to certain types of infections because our overall health status is not that great when we are anemic. So they do CBCs, they will sometimes do a CRP to know if there's inflammation. Now, all of these things have their benefit in their place, but having an elevated CRP tells you there's inflammation in the body, whether it's due to infection or some other source or an autoimmune condition. You can't differentiate it really. Then they will tell you that we will check for your iron levels, we'll check your vitamin D level, your vitamin B12 levels. These are all relevant and important, but they can't tell you if your immune system is okay or not. So we as immunologists know that we really need the patient in front of us, and we need to get their history. Are they having more cutaneous infections? Are they having more fungal infections as a history? Are they having more respiratory infections? Is it largely upper respiratory or is it lower respiratory? Are they having bad periodontitis? Are they having bad gingivitis? Are they having a lot of carious teeth, which can point to certain type of immunodeficiency conditions? Yeah. So we immunologists take a very, very careful history to determine whether we have to evaluate all aspects of this person's immune system. Do we have to mostly focus on their humoral immune system? Do we have to focus on their cellular immune system? And so when we do that kind of an evaluation, it is a lot more specific. So while I can't say that the tests that are being done by some of the labs when they are selling people what we call the immune panels, I have already seen some patients call with it, should I be doing this? Should I be not doing this? And I tell them that this is a general analysis of your health. I don't know whether I would call this immunity check. Okay. For an immunity check, you really need to see a specialist. And if you have a history of having recurrent infections, that's really the biggest giveaway. Like with season changes, people get colds, okay? And then it takes them a week or 10 days to get over that cold, okay? Or they eat outside and they get sick. Or they have different presentation, they get skin rashes and skin problems all the time, or their teeth are very bad, they're making very frequent visits to the dentist and they keep on getting infections that even the dentist doesn't know. They're brushing, they're flossing, they're doing everything, and still sometimes there is an underlying immune problem in such cases, and that requires a proper evaluation by an immunologist. But some of these tests that I mentioned, a CBC, a CRP, a vitamin D, a vitamin B12, some of these can be an overall superficial screening. You know, people may say that, okay, then we can also do further analysis in terms of looking at liver function, kidney function, because if someone has a chronic disease, then their immune system won't work well. But these are all what I call quasi tests. These are not real tests of immunity. These are kind of trying to get to the picture by putting small pieces of the puzzle together. Yeah. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. So basically, we should visit an immunologist before and understand how our individual immunity works, and then we can think of further practice and other stuffs. So what precautions should we take to avoid COVID-19 and how to safeguard the elderly and children from it?
Okay. So your first question was, how do we protect ourselves from COVID? Right? Precautions that we have to take. So I will give you the general precautions, which I'm sure all of you already know. You know, we have heard enough about hand washing and hand sanitizing. That's something I cannot impress upon you all how important it is, because trust me, I don't look that old, but I belong to that era when dentists used to practice without hand gloves.
No.
Okay. So I have seen it all. I know you all don't do, you all belong to a different era. I don't look that old, but I have 30 years of medical training and practice under my belt already. So hand washing, hand sanitizing, even if you're wearing gloves, is probably, and even if you're going out, you're touching surfaces, because this is very much transmitted from objects and fomites. As we know, this virus has the capacity to survive on plastic for 3 days, on metal for 3 days, on cardboard for at least 24 hours, and on other surfaces for a few hours for sure. And interestingly, even the temperature does not seem to matter as it did in some of the earlier coronaviruses. So hand washing, first one. Second is what they're calling social distancing. I like to call it physical distancing, because you don't socially cut off from people. You really want to talk to friends, your family, you want to do webinars, you want to interact with live human beings. Lockdown doesn't mean you're socially disconnected. It means you're physically disconnected. Okay. So physical distancing, let's say you're in your practice and you want people, even when you're talking to them, at least 3 feet away from you. And in case, ideally, like they're in the waiting areas and all, ideal situation would be 6 feet apart, as you've heard. Okay. So physical distancing where possible. Now, if you start doing procedures, you're not going to be 3 feet away from people. So we'll talk about that in a later question. Okay.
Okay.
The next thing that comes in, besides these two things, hand washing and social distancing, is the mask. Now, when I did my first interview on a news channel on January 21st is when I did it. They somehow came to know I'm an immunologist. They were a very new channel. They invited me to speak. And back then I was telling people that wear a mask when you go out. It took the CDC a month and a half from there in the US to start telling everyone in America, even if you make a 2-ply home-based cloth mask, to start wearing masks. And if you look at Korea, South Korea and Japan, the most successful places on the face of this earth to control the COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 virus, they have also said that wearing masks has been their biggest success story, besides many other good things that they were doing in terms of hygiene and all that. Other than that, respiratory hygiene. So if someone is coughing, sneezing, using a tissue, using a handkerchief, which you will then wash and clean properly, not just keep somewhere, discard properly. Coughing into your elbow or into your shoulder if you really have to cough or sneeze, because sometimes coughs do come for other reasons. I'm an allergist. My patients may cough because there's pollen in the air. Now, people will start getting scared. Oh my God, ये खांस रहा है, इसको COVID है. नहीं बाबा, सब कुछ is not. अभी भी लोगों को अस्थमा है, अभी भी लोगों को COPD है. You know, there are infections. Okay. So people cough and sneeze, remember to control how you spread it. So these are the basic precautions, as I would say, for every live human being to take. And trust me, if we become a community that we wear masks, the transmission of tuberculosis will decrease immensely.
Oh.
Okay, which kills 1,000 people every day.
My God, we never knew this, sir.
Which is way more than what coronavirus or COVID-19 has done in 3 years. If you take the numbers. Influenza kills 5 lakh people. We have still reached about 3,400,000 or 40,000 somewhere we are.
Globally.
3.5. Every year globally, influenza kills 5 lakh people. Some people even at 6 lakh. So realize that this virus is new. So there's a lot of scare, a lot of fear, but this is not the end of the world. Your second part of your question was elderly and children. Children staying home is currently the best thing we can do. When they go back to school, we will have to figure out ways to keep them apart within classes also. I know that's not going to be easy, especially the younger the child. So keeping them home is the smartest thing. Same thing goes for the elderly, keeping them home, you know, making sure they're having a healthy diet, lifestyle, exercising, giving them the best for their immunity. I know we'll talk about it in the latter part of your questions also. But really for them, physical distancing, face mask, hand washing, hand sanitizing, hand hygiene. This is universal for everyone, whether you're a practicing dentist or whether you're the grandparents at home or you're the children at home. I hope that answers your question. We'll go into more details of precautions specifically guided towards dentists, hopefully in subsequent questions.
Yeah. So
Sir,
there's one last
question.
Yeah.
With our discussion. Sayogita, 1 second. Sayogita, 1 second. So I had a cross question. So how do you put it? Is the virus spreading more because of aerosols, or is it spreading more because it remains on the surfaces alive for quite a few hours? So what is the major mode of
aerosols is
transmission of the virus?
aerosols is its biggest
spreading. Okay, because if it stays
so,
alive
you know,
on plastic for 3 days,
so certainly surfaces are a source, and that is why you will see videos even of Wuhan, China, and Italy and US, where people are doing this mass spraying in public places with different kind of hypochlorite bleach solutions, etc., different going on. We can't deny that, but the large majority of transmission, Anand, still happens to be through aerosols. So first we thought that this was just through respiratory droplets. Then we changed it to saying that it is through micro droplets. And later on, we even went to the extent of saying with some data that was coming out of Japan that this is airborne. Airborne means it is very fine particulate matter, which, let's say you're wearing a mask, but the mask has gaps and holes. It's going to get, you've covered everything, but your neck and hair is open. Tomorrow it's going to settle there. And if you touch those areas after you go home, it can spread. So this is a very different virus, a very different contagion really to talk about. So, but the biggest transmission is airborne, and that is why doing the cross ventilation, keeping the windows open, using exhaust fans, all of those make a lot of sense rather than always sitting in our air conditioned units and practicing. Life is going to change. There's no doubt about it. After this virus, life is going to change
in a big way, I'm sure.
Yes.
Sanyogita, back to you.
Yes. So now aerosol, it is a proven fact that it is aerosol. Now we dentists, we have to work with aerosols, right? So what is the ideal time to start a practice? Like when the curve flattens, like they say it is still on the increasing end, when the curve flattens or when the cases reduce, or should we start now with precautions? Like there is a dilemma always there in mind, to start or not to start.
Okay, so don't quote me as authority, okay, who has the authority to do. I will tell you from my personal experience and my personal feelings and my personal knowledge, okay. I feel that if you wait for the curve to stay flat and if you wait for the cases to die down, you'll stay home for the next 6 months or 1 year. Because even in places that were in strict lockdown, when they're opening back, the cases haven't gone away. The cases are still there. And the cases are still happening. So I think that while we should follow governmental advice and governmental suggestions in a conservative way, in a careful manner, and in a cautious way, I think people can begin their practices. I really do. I started my practice. I do it a couple of days a week. I get in patients with the right kind of screening, with the right kind of triaging, with the right kind of precautions. And I've put certain things in place with my practice. Now, y'all are at a higher risk. So in my practice, I do pulmonary function testing, lung function testing.
True.
We have been told across the globe that allergists, immunologists, asthma specialists should not do lung function testing now. Okay.
Yes.
Now, the fact still remains that there's going to be a subset of patients that if I don't do pulmonary function testing, I can't evaluate if they have asthma, if they have reversible. So at a certain point, I have to bite the bullet and decide that I have screened this patient through all the questionnaires, which I think every dentist should also consider having in their office, which their staff will talk to the patient and confirm that they don't have those symptoms before they come in. When they come in, most dentists don't think of taking a temperature, right? But I think you all should start consider taking a temperature. Okay. And you should see whether the person is mildly, do they have a temperature above 99.5, which you would call a fever in an adult? And if you should really start considering, is this someone who really needs an emergency or an urgent procedure? And then you have to take extra precautions and do it for them. And if they don't have something that's an emergency, then maybe you want to do it at a later time point. Okay. Them later when they are better and afebrile. So I think that with the right kind of caution, right kind of precaution, the right kind of, as I would say, questions that your staff ask them before an appointment, when they get to your appointment, with the right kind of consent forms in place, dentists can start their practices. And I know that I can just see which number slide it is, but I had put in a slide. If you can bring slide number 8 up. Will I have to do that?
Just give us a minute, sir.
No, just a minute, sir. They'll do it.
The screen is being shared. Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll have to scroll it down, sir. Yeah.
So, I was going to show this a little later, but are you seeing the prevented practices in dentistry in COVID-19 era?
You'll need to just make it full screen. So just start the
Make it
presentation
full screen.
because it's not readable right now. Yeah, it's not readable.
Yeah.
Yes, now it's perfect, sir.
So, if you're willing to follow all these things, you really have to consider, even because asymptomatic patients across the globe, we thought were around 40-50%. Okay. These are people who have no fever, no cough, no body pain, no loss of smell. By the way, remember to screen for loss of smell and loss of taste. Up to 20% patients present with that. They have no other symptom. I have personally known 3 cases that we do screening for, and I've treated them long distance after that, who had nothing but sudden loss of smell and taste. Okay. People can have diarrhea, they can have abdominal symptoms, pain, nausea, they can have many, many different things, and they need to be screened because a potential asymptomatic patient is also a COVID-19 carrier. Okay.
True.
If they have recovered, and there's been at least 30 days since they have recovered, and they have no symptoms, then they are generally considered safe. And if you're identifying an urgent need or an emergent need, those are definitely cases that you can treat with all the precautions. You have to categorize the dental treatment. I've put that in the next slide. Identifying the need, the risk, the benefit, and then taking all the contact and airborne precautions that you can. And if you're going to do procedures, the basic requirement that I would say is using an N95 mask. If you want to be extra cautious, then use a 3-ply surgical mask on top of your N95 mask also. Some people are doing that, frankly. Using goggles and then a face shield. And along with this, using potentially double gloves, not even single gloves, and preferably nitrile gloves, if not less. And if you're going to do something where there's going to be a lot of aerosol generation, then it's really a personal call whether you use a full PPE, which is the gown, the legging, the head cover, all those things. But again, when I think I took this from one of the dental publications only, where they looked at patients who are asymptomatic and unsuspected. They took them as symptomatic and suspected. And from that, you get categories A, B, and then category C, which I've mentioned below. You all can see that possibly, which depending on what they require, whether they have active disease, whether they are a recovered patient with more than 30 days since they recovered, and then the kind of treatment. So if they are a recovered patient and have absolutely no problems and no symptoms more than 30 days, you can do all kinds of treatments with them because they are technically the safest patients, right? But remember one more thing, that saliva tends to have very high viral loads. So even higher than respiratory secretions now we are finding. And we are also finding that the eye, the conjunctiva, the ocular membrane is able to receive and get the infection into the body. Some people are saying even 100 times more than what our respiratory mucosa can. So goggles, face shield are extremely important. Wow. Do not underestimate it if you're going to practice in this COVID-19 era. And then potentially single or double, but N95 mask for dentists, you're going to see probably guidelines coming out from different authorities saying that you can work with a 3-ply surgical mask. But I think if you're trying to prevent aerosol transmission, then an N95 happens to be a better way to do that. And that too, a proper N95. There are many N95s out there which are not really N95. So hopefully that, and then you don't need a respirator in that. You really don't need a respirator in N95. People are asking whether you need a respirator. So I hope that kind of, it was a long answer, but I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
Yeah, go.
So dentistry is all about aerosols.
I had a small query.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, Anand.
Yes.
Yes. So you mentioned about wearing double gloves.
Right. So
does it spread through blood, or what is the reason for wearing double gloves?
So interestingly, Anand, the SARS-CoV-2 virus has been found in every single bodily secretion. Okay.
Okay.
So ocular secretions, nasal secretions, oral secretions, blood, urine, feces, stools. Okay. In fact, in stools, the shedding may go on for up to 37 days after it has resolved. But luckily, what we are finding out now is that that is not the complete viral particle, so it may not be infectious. But we don't certain that's an active area of research. And recently, I don't know, there were many jokes going on about this, but they even found it in semen now. Okay.
Wow.
So there is no
So it's
bodily
everywhere.
secretion that is SARS-CoV impermeable. It is there in every bodily secretion. The receptors, what are called ACE2 receptor, the ACE2 receptor through which the virus gains entry into the body, is present in your kidney, in your bladder, in your gut, in your respiratory tract, in your salivary glands. It's everywhere. There are a few organs in which we don't have ACE2 inhibitors. ACE2. So, you know, this whole Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and Soch Khule Mein Mat is a very important thing right now. We actually have to push it because through stools, through active patients who may be mildly symptomatic and maybe still going for Soch outside, they can potentially spread it, or they are outside, they can potentially spread it. This is a good wake-up call for India and Indians.
No, thank you, sir. We never knew that.
So we
Thank
can
you.
have numerous typhoid Marys in India. We could have
Yes,
numerous
yes.
typhoid Marys in India if we are talking about something like this. Wow, this was
And,
eye-opening.
and
Sir,
truthfully, you know,
hereby I would like to invite Dr. Yes.
I was going to say a
Yes,
single
yes.
woman
Sorry, sir.
in South Korea, a single woman in South Korea in a church singing hymns with the rest of the church gave the injection to 40 individuals. And an R naught of 40. R naught is the rate of spread. Okay, we normally believe it is 1 to 2. One patient gives it to 2 people or SARS-CoV. She had an R naught of 40. She was the only person with the infection, gave it to 40 other people. She was loudly singing.
Was it an AC room?
Corona is here to stay.
No, it was an open. It wasn't completely open, but from what we know, I don't know all the details, but it wasn't a completely closed, air-conditioned church.
Yeah, churches are not air conditioned, right?
Yeah.
So let's take this forward. Let me invite Dr. Sushil Kumar Jha, sir. He is from Ranchi in Jharkhand, and he has a few questions for you.
No, I am from
Dr.
Patna.
Sushil, sir, over to you.
No.
Patna.
Oh,
Yeah, Dr.
sorry,
Anand, I
sir.
am from Patna. Okay, okay. No problem.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
good evening, Dr. Sitesh, and good evening to every panelist present here, along
Good
with
evening.
everyone.
Good evening, sir.
My question will be, what is actually this viral load and what its significance to us?
Okay. So, as you can expect, the most common example that you all may know as dentists, because you all have practiced through the HIV era, is when we viral load in HIV, we are talking about the number of viral particles that can be detected. There we do in blood generally, because we want to know how well the antiretroviral drugs are working and how well they are keeping the viral load in control. So the viral load is something that tells us the number of infectious particles per ml, let's say, of that secretion or that body fluid, or whatever you want to classify it as, depending on the test and the lab. We don't have it routinely and easily available here in India, but it is relevant. I'll tell you why. The most important piece of information that you all need to know is that the people would think that the ones who are severely ill, the ones who are in the ICU, on a ventilator or on BiPAP and very, very sick are the ones who would have the highest viral loads. And the ones who we are saying are asymptomatic. And in India, it's estimated 69% people are in the pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic group. They would have low viral loads. That's not true. Very good research has shown that people who have asymptomatic infection may have viral load as high as people who are symptomatic. Again, here, Anand, I'm going to project a slide here. If you can just bring it up.
Sure, sir. Yes, sir. We'll have it in a minute. Yeah, it's up.
So the viral loads in asymptomatic transmission. And what was found was, and this was a paper published in the New England Journal of Medicine, February 2020, and they showed the viral load that was detected in asymptomatic patients was similar to that in symptomatic patients, which suggests that the transmission potential of asymptomatic patients is not lower than the ones who are symptomatic. And I think that this is a very important piece of information first. And the viral load is important because the higher the viral load, the higher the chance that the respiratory secretions, the microaerosols, the micro droplets that will come out of the nose or mouth or whatever can the infection to the person who is working with that patient. The other reason why this is important is when we do follow-up studies of patients who are sick. So let's say there is someone who's severely ill and they start getting better by God's grace. Remember that 95% people in the world, for the most part, do get better, even the severe cases, with the right care, obviously. So when those people are recovering, we do the RT-PCR, which is done on the pharyngeal swab or the oropharyngeal swab, and we check for viral particles. And what we find is that even though the person's symptoms may last longer, their viral loads are decreasing somewhere around week 2, week 3.
Week 3.
And so what ends up happening is, though the patient may be shedding virus or particles of the virus, because remember, it incorporates into the human cell, makes it its factory, and then comes out. But what comes out may not be the complete virion, the complete viral particle. So shedding may continue longer than the actual infectious virus is there in the secretions. And so studies on viral load are still going on. It is still a very active area of research. People are tracking it to see how it goes down as the person recovers and correlate it with their symptoms. But the viral load is important because of the risk of transmission. And unfortunately, for all of us human beings, even asymptomatic people can have enough viral load to make another person sick.
Okay, thank you. My second question will be, what are the chances of a dentist to get this disease?
Okay. The chances of a dentist getting the disease is just as much as Prince Charles, much as Tom Hanks. You would have thought that Prince Charles and Tom Hanks should not have caught this infection, right? But they did too. And they are as much as they are of you and me catching it. So this virus does not look at boundaries, borders, color, race, creed, profession, financial status, nothing. It is the one unifying reality about this virus. So if you say what is the risk for a doctor versus a dentist, it's the same, because you just don't know who comes and sits in the chair in front of you. So, and everyone in this situation can be a potential transmission agent. So much so that when school begins, your kid goes to school and comes back, you cannot know whether your kid could give it to you. Okay. Majority of the outbreaks of influenza, majority of the outbreaks of, so the old coronaviruses give us sneezing, runny nose and fever. Okay. The old coronaviruses, HK, OC43, there are about 4 or 5 of them. Those viruses during change of seasons transmit through the community freely. Many people get it. Those who have got it before become partially immune or completely immune, may not get it in the next season, but 2 seasons after that, they may again get it because the virus has mutated. So we are all at risk, and dentists are at increased risk because you are very close proximity with the patient. You have to be in the mouth, you have to be doing aerosol generating procedures. You have to do all these. You must have seen, and I'm not suggesting that you all do this, but you all have seen where they collect the swab sitting in a booth where there's a plexiglass and only the hand comes out and it does what it has to. I can only imagine that tomorrow a dentist will start practicing like that. There'll be a plexiglass between them and the patient, and the hand goes out and they do what they have to, and the dentist is. I don't think, I'm just joking.
We have had some innovating dentists trying to create something like that. something very similar to that. But it is
Anesthetists
not physically
have started
possible
doing
because
that,
it has
right?
to be very practical.
Yeah, anesthetists have started doing that. They are using the plexiglass thing and they're doing the intubation so that there's no direct spray of the aerosol on them, okay?
Yeah.
With intubating. So
We have something similar.
we don't have to become crazy. We don't have to become paranoid. We have to take our precautions, but we have to realize that we are in a world, at least for the next 1 year or 1.5 years, we are in a world where we have to learn to coexist. And at this point, I would like to say something which we'll have more questions on later. It's not the virus you have to be worried about. It's your immunity that you have to be worried about.
Yeah,
If
true.
your system is healthy and strong, you may get the COVID-19, the SARS-CoV-2, and not even realize. You may have a little sore throat, a little body pain, a little feverish feeling, and you may be better after a week. You will never get a test done to know you even had it. So the real focus is on your immune system, is what I would say. So with that, I close this question. We can come into it more in later questions.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. My
Let
next
me
question
welcome
is.
Dr. Saurabh Shah.
Okay.
Dr.
Please.
Sushil sir, let me welcome Dr. Saurabh Shah into the panel.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
Dr. Saurabh Shah, he is a practicing dentist from Mumbai, a very, very good friend of mine. Dr. Saurabh, I guess you have few questions for Dr. Siddesh, sir. Please.
Yes. First of all, Dr. Siddesh, namaste. No handshakes and hi this time.
We can do a hi-fi also.
Hello.
Yes.
We can even do
Yeah, we can do a hi-fi. So, right, sir. So, thank you for the informative points. Your point, answer. Yes. Points and the questions and answers are informative that we are coming on track. So the next point that, sir, I would like to ask is, what are the different techniques and methods by which we can reduce the viral load for our patients and for us also, so that we can reduce the chances of getting transmission?
So Saurabh, thanks again for joining and for guiding me yesterday in our trial run also and today. When we look at precautionary measures, the precautionary measures truly start with the patient, okay? So when you screen the patient, and like I said, you all can have forms that your staff will ask people when they are asking questions before coming in. And if they are what you would call a high risk or a potential patient, you really have to choose whether to get them into the practice or send them to a center that may be more capable of handling it with full PPEs, etc., because you may not have it in your practice. So a thorough screening of patients, a thorough triaging, taking the temperature when they come in, having them give you consent forms, because tomorrow I don't see where medico-legally people might say, I came to your practice and tomorrow I turned positive, so I got it from your practice. So consent forms, which we may not have been doing before, may also be very important and relevant. These are available. If you all need it, you all can get in touch with me or get in touch with Dr. Sayugita. I'll share it with her. But doing that, that's the patient base. Second is for the staff, keeping the staff safe. Keep the staff safe. The first thing that I would say is educating the staff. The one thing that China, Japan, South Korea really did fantastically is they educated their population about this virus, how it is spread, where it comes from, what people can do to take care of it, what the symptoms are of the virus. So if your staff is well trained, then your staff will be able to prevent you from seeing people who potentially you should not be seeing, firstly. And secondly, if you are going to still see them because they have an urgent or emergent problem, then using all the precautions before you see them. And so the staff education, the staff training, the staff sensitization, recognizing that every patient that walks into your practice should bring their own mask with them, even if it's a 2-ply cloth mask. And if they don't, then you should be able to give them a mask while they're sitting in the waiting areas, etc. Having hand sanitization patients when they come in, limit the number of family members that come with them, hopefully only one or none, if that's possible, where possible. And so, and then they sit with appropriate distance. So even if they have an asymptomatic viral load, they're not spreading it to everyone there. And if someone does happen to be a high risk, and if you have space in your practice, putting them into a separate room rather than keeping everyone with them, because you still have to see them and treat them because they have an acute or a severe problem, becomes very, very important. So those are things for the patient. Now for the doctor. With the doctor, really, as I have already answered it, the precautions that you have to take till the patient comes into your chamber, and in your chamber, it should just be you, the patient, and your assistant. There shouldn't be too many people overcrowding in there, because the more the number of people, the more if someone is asymptomatic of the viral load going up. So you can't do much about it otherwise once everyone is there. So keeping the number of people in your practice to a limited when you're actually doing your procedures, and then all the usual things what I said, hand washing before the procedure, putting on all the required stuff as we discussed, hand washing after the procedure. The patient themselves, one more very interesting thing which I had thought about, and also some of my dental hygienist colleagues and followers in the US also said, is having your patient do a pre-rinse before you start their procedure, and maybe even doing that rinse every 15 or 20 minutes with diluted peroxide or with chlorhexidine, whatever you all wish to do. But that will temporarily reduce the amount. But remember, it's not going to go all the way to the back of the throat. You can tell them to deep gargle also, but it's still not going to make the area completely free in case the virus is there and in the screening nothing has shown up. But a pre-rinsing, not just with water as we routinely do in many dental practices, but with some microbicidal agent, can be very, very relevant in reducing the viral load. Okay, you all can seriously think about this thing and figure out what is best that you all want to do. Then obviously when you're taking off all the personal protective equipment, taking the right steps, the right stages, it's all available on the internet. You can read it up, how to take each thing off. And finally, after you have done all that, when you're ready to go home, taking all the precautions at that point. So wearing this, many dentists I've seen even today just routinely also wear surgical gowns to protect their clothing. And it can make all the sense in the world in this era to do that. And then those gowns and all your other stuff is in whatever way it is done. It would become very expensive to do it after every patient, probably not practical also, but after certain intervals doing that is very, very reasonable. So these are the ways I think of reducing viral load. I hope I've answered your question. If there is still something lingering in your mind, you can ask me if I didn't understand what you meant by reducing our viral load or that of our patient. This is what I think of reducing viral load.
So, do the air purifiers work in this time of reducing the viral load?
Good question. Yeah, I had meant to say that. Thanks, Dr. Sanyogita. Good. You brought that up. So, people have suggested that if you have a HEPA air purifier running, it may make a difference. There may be a small difference that it makes. People have suggested have negative or positive air pressure, vents, those things like that. Use a exhaust fan so that it keeps clearing the aerosols. In my practice, frankly, since I do a practice in which I work with the respiratory system all the time, upper, lower, everything, we literally keep our practice doors open these days. We don't have patients hold that handlebar and open and close our doors. My cabin is open all the time, most of the time, okay, except when I'm having my lunch or something like that. But so the touching of surfaces, touching of fomites is reduced, and then have the capacity and the good God's blessing of having a practice in which you have windows, you have doors, you cross ventilation. Because when you cross ventilate and if you run the fan instead of the AC, then the cross ventilation works even better, and with that you may be able to reduce the viral load to some extent. How effective this will be, how successful this will be, I don't know. But if you've traveled Uber after Uber started running its service, you will realize that many of the drivers nowadays prefer keeping those open rather than turning on the AC till you actually ask them, can you have the AC? Because even they know that if you do cross ventilation, the chance of transmitting the virus is less. Now, other procedures that can be done, which I would suggest people get in touch with me individually, because I don't know how right it is. There are certain devices, machines that, sure you all have heard about fogging and fumigation and all those things. There are pros and cons to it, but Using an air purifier may not be a bad idea, a proper air purifier, at least in your main core area. I'm not saying for the entire practice, but in your room, again, which one, what capacity, what way, get in touch with me, because I do work in those areas. You know, indoor and outdoor air quality is my passion, besides
Okay.
the other things that I do. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, sir.
Right, sir.
Yes, sir. You
Saurabh,
can
yes.
go ahead.
Sir, continue same lines. One more question. That yeah. So we have accepted that we cannot control the virus. So the only thing that we have to do is increase our immunity. So, sir, what do you suggest? How can we boost our immunity, and tips and tricks that we can make immunity, and the things which can harm our immunity, which we should avoid?
So, Saurabh, if I gave you the option right now, you know, we are all in lockdown, and I tell you that you can
Yes, sir.
sleep till 10 o'clock in the morning, and then your favorite web series till 2 a.m. in the morning. Would you do that?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
This is a
Already doing
fantastic
that.
way. This is a fantastic way to damage your immune system. Okay,
Oh,
your immune system.
we have been damaging it since almost 60 days.
Yeah, your immune system is very closely connected to the cycle of the sun. Whether you or not. Ancient medicine says this, modern medicine also accepts it now, because we know all the different hormones that are released in the body when you sleep at night versus sleeping early in the morning. Okay, and then late till 10, 11 o'clock the next day, because we don't have anywhere to go. So, right from the way you sleep, okay, how many hours you sleep. So 60 hours, you must have heard that everywhere. It is still very relevant, still very important. Okay. To what you eat and drink. So right now you may be, अरे कुछ करने को नहीं है, खाने से तो कुछ खुशी मिले, तो एक टप मंगा लो, आइसक्रीम खा लो दबा के, cold drink पी लो दबा के. Fantastic ways of damaging your immune system. Because we already have dormant and latent viruses, bacteria already in our body. If we lower our immune system by doing these things, we basically increase the chances we'll catch something else, including potentially SARS-CoV-2 when we start practicing.
Okay.
You eat junk food, you damage your immune system. You eat fast food, you damage your immune system. You eat a healthy, freshly prepared meal, diet. You eat salad, soups. You eat fresh vegetables, fresh fruits. You improve your immunity. So you go out in the sun for a walk. You get fresh air. You boost your immunity. Your immunity begins very much from diet and lifestyle. You want a logical answer from me? I'll give you the logical answer also. The logical answer is, they'll say optimize your vitamin D. If you don't take a supplement, think of taking it, especially if you're not a very outdoorsy person. And I'll promise you that with us having what the world calls brown skin, I think we are all fair, okay, by the way. But having brown skin reduces the amount of vitamin D you make even when you're in sunlight. I don't know if you knew this or not.
No, we didn't know.
Supplement with 1,000 or 2,000 international units of vitamin D. Smart thing to do in these days. You zinc. You might want to take some vitamin C. I'm a strong believer, and on my team, so in my Dr. Roy Health Solutions practice, I have 3 divine diet counselors. Every single patient of mine is offered to see them even long before coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2 came. For every single patient of mine, I would suggest to them that get your diet right. That's the best way to protect yourself from many diseases, okay, including dental diseases. So, know all the downsides of having all the sugar and all the refined foods and all that. I don't need to bring coal to Manchester, as they say, tell you about it. But all these are ways of lowering your immunity, not just in your mouth, but also in your whole body. Okay, so bad enemy of the immune system. So when in my practice, when patients see us, we tell that, have a body aligned diet designed. And in that, give them a lot of guidance about immune detoxing and immune boosting, both customized to the person's body type and requirements. I also believe in ancient medicine. You can probably guess that from what I'm saying. So eat the right diet, live the right lifestyle, get the adequate sleep, do some exercise. So if I told you, hey, अभी कौन चल रहा है, पड़े रहो, आराम करो, कुछ भी मत करो, कहीं जाने को है नहीं. Some buildings won't even allow you to go down for your walk these days, okay? So, but that's the time. This is the time that God, if you God, Allah, Uparwala, Rab, whatever you want to call him, has given us to boost our immunity. Ghar mein do free hand exercises, do pranayam, do deep breathing exercises. Okay, these are fantastic ways of boosting your immunity. These are tested, not lab tested. These are time tested mechanisms of boosting your immunity. And dentists need as much as doctors do, as much as general population does. So whether you do skip rope at home or you do freehand aerobic exercises, you turn on the TV or the video, or you follow Baba Ramdev at 6:30 in the morning on his channel, or whatever you wish to do. But exercise don't become, as they call, a couch potato. Okay, in these days. The more you're physically active, the happier your immune system is, and the happier you'll be when you go back to practice. And try to maintain some of these things even after you go back. Now, besides this, there are a lot of things. I would actually like to project a slide here. Saurabh, if you can help me, I shall get to that slide.
Sure, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, it's online. Yes, sir.
It's online, sir.
So here I've put in some of the things. I already covered these, but after this I'll give you. So we have a fantastic system called Ayush, which is a combination of homeopathy, Ayurveda, Unani, and government under our PM Modi ji has done a lot of work on this thing, and these things are out there for you all to see and use. I won't say that I normally align myself with any one system. I align myself with 9 systems besides allopathic medicine. And who believe in homeopathy and want to use arsenic the way it's been described, or if you want to believe in Ayurveda and you want to drink herbal teas that have haldi and honey and other things in it, and keep drinking warm water, not hot water, and don't go overboard of drinking it every 15 minutes. That's all crazy. I don't believe in those things. But drinking it in a reasonable way with the right things added, there are a lot of things that are out there that, and we as India can truly show the way to the world of doing these things. Because in China doesn't have any data on this, but they used a lot of their local herbal preparations in helping people recover from these infections. I'm sure you all must have heard the entire police force in Pune was given homeopathy
Yes,
by some
yes.
organizations, and even in Mumbai, the same thing was done by some of my friends and colleagues who do a fantastic job with homeopathy. They have done it with the Mumbai police also, at least sections of it. I don't know if all of them have gotten. But these are that, depending on your belief and faith structure, I don't want to convince you to do this or not do this, but these are you can also do side by side and do with your family. People, for time immemorial, hot milk with haldi, it should be adulterated haldi, and if you have a diet counselor like my team members do, and they get the right haldi, having hot milk with honey is a fantastic way of boosting your immune system. I truly believe in it. You'll tell me, Dr. Roy, is there a placebo-controlled double-blinded trial? I'll tell you no, but I'll tell you, does it work? Absolutely does, in my belief. Don't ignore these things is all I would say. So there are a lot of things on a personal level, on a professional level, on an individual level that can be done, both with you and family, because your family has to be safe also if you have to be safe. So it's not just about us as individuals, and then eventually for all of our society, because if our society is healthy, our country is healthy. If our country is healthy, our world is healthy. So we have to look into this from that perspective, nothing short of that. We have to have a holistic approach. Does that answer the question, Saurabh?
Yes.
Yes, in a complete detailed way. And thank you very much for bringing other streams of medicine into this, so that we can help and boost our immunity. And thank you very much, sir, for the questions. So now I'll ask Dr. Anand if he has any
So
questions
I would like to
for
comment.
you, sir.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, I wanted to take this to a different level now. There is something that we have been listening to for the past 2 months. Especially, I have not heard of this word, herd immunity. A lot of the countries have been banking on it, and we have been told maybe that is the only way forward. So, is it actually what it is? And I really don't know how it works, what it does. What is it? What is it? Is it just not doing anything at all?
So herd immunity is to bank on herd immunity is like Anand, you would say that मेरा बाजू वाला कमाएगा और वो जब सब कमा लेगा तब वो मुझे दे देगा और मैं बच जाऊंगा और मुझे काम करने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है. Okay. या तुम जाके बाहर सब कुछ कर लो, you do everything outside and get it done, and when it's done then call me, then I'll wake up and I'll come outside. Okay, बाहर तुम लड़ाई कर लो जो भी, और फिर जब सब सेफ हो जाएगा. I don't mean to downplay what it means. Herd immunity basically means when a certain segment of the population has been exposed to the virus, and when that segment becomes immune to the virus, then the spreading of the virus in the community goes down, and this is directly connected to the transmission factor, what is called the R0. So the R for SARS-CoV-2 is between 2 and 3. It was 4 when it first was at its peak in India. It went down to 1.4 and it has again gone up again in certain at least red zones or hotspots. It varies zone to zone. But this R0 determines how many people in the population need to become immune before the transmission cycle of the virus in the community will break. R0 of 2, which is a very conservative R0 for SARS-CoV-2 virus, COVID-19 infection, you need 60% of India's population to have been exposed to the virus and be to it, whether through asymptomatic infection, mildly symptomatic infection, which is 80%, moderately symptomatic 10, 20, 15%, or severely infected, severely symptomatic, which would be 5%. Okay. When 60 to 70% of India's population, so we are talking about 75 crore people having been exposed to coronavirus, COVID-19, it's going to take a long time, Anand, long time. 2 years, 3 years, that after all the lockdowns have been opened and everyone is free,
maybe more.
We're not going to do right now. So banking on herd immunity is as much as banking on the next big wave to come and bring 15 lakh rupees into your bank account directly. If you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, yes.
So I totally got your point.
That's not what we are banking on. What you have to bank on is your own immunity. Herd immunity is a long distance away. It's a horizon. We will get there someday, but not in the next few weeks or months. So really, vaccines are the answer in that sense, and vaccines also will take time. We can talk about it if you all have questions on it. But end of time, it's your own personal immunity, your own family immunity. And about personal and family immunity, I also have been working on ancient customized supplements for a very long time, and many of my patients also take from us in our practices. And I have been fortunate. I have thousands of patients currently in India and many of them also abroad. Those who have been following my protocols with the diet, with taking the natural supplements, none of them have really called me with saying that they are infected. That's God's grace, blessing. I hope through time it stays true. But really work on your own immunity, work on your own surroundings, work on your own practice, your own staff, your own people. Don't bank on immunity right now. It's a long, and just to give you perspective, Wuhan, where this all began, okay, 70,000 cases, 80,000 cases, whatever might have been there in that strict area, they went back. I'm very glad they did this research. It is now in the public domain. They estimated that amongst 1.1 crore population in Wuhan, 0.5% people had infection, 0.45%. Okay. So they decided to do a study where they wanted to see how many of those 1.1 crore who did not get the infection would be immune, would have antibodies, IgG and IgM, SARS-CoV-2. Fantastic study. I would have thought of doing it myself, and I hope someday it's done in other parts of the world also. I want you all to guess how many people you think of those 1.1 crore. They took sample populations from different places, different types, different ages, and they tested. What percentage do you think would have had IgG and IgM to SARS-CoV-2? Just take a blind guess. 0.4% has been directly exposed and infected. Okay, there have been asymptomatic patients, unknown infections, all that taken into consideration. In Wuhan, how many people do you think had antibodies? We don't even know if they're neutralizing antibodies or not.
All.
I think, sir, I'll go with 0. Very less percentage.
Well, 0 can't be the answer because 0.45 right?
Right. Very less percentage.
Yes.
Very less. So we have 0, we have all. So we have 0 to 100. Anand, what's your call? What's your take?
70%. 70%.
Dr. Sushil, want to take a guess how many people are immune to SARS-CoV-2 now after being the epicenter and the start of this whole thing?
All are.
No, about 70%.
Okay. You'll be shocked to hear the answer is 2.5%.
My God.
Okay.
Why?
Very less.
Why? But
Why? Because we cannot assume that everyone got exposed to it, and even if they get exposed to it, they had enough antibodies that they developed. So maybe the antibody test will get better and we may detect 5%, 7%, 8%, 60% tak pahunchna hai. 60% we have to reach. Just take an idea how long it's going to take. That's the reason why I brought this whole anecdote up for you all.
okay.
Right.
Next question.
It got the
Coming in. Yeah.
It got the point across. I know it did.
Yes. It really got it across.
we got into the perspective.
From the
herd immunity. Right. Okay. Please take it.
So I have a question coming in from the crowd. Dr. Anil Bail is asking, can a person with good immunity also be a carrier?
Yes.
In fact, children who seem to have the least symptoms with the infection and people who have no symptoms, which is the asymptomatic group, generally are whose immune system is plastic enough, flexible enough, malleable enough that they adjust and fight off the virus and get rid of it. Unfortunately, those are the people who are going to spread the disease the most once the lockdowns open. People say that when you get back in practice, and please don't take this in a negative way, I know we live in joint families, but you have to take care when you come home and you have elderly family members at home who are still staying home and following all the precautions, because the healthy people are the ones who can get the infection in and they may never even know that they got it in. So of 60 people with chronic diseases, anything in the family, we all have to take extra care and precaution for all of them, because healthy immune systems may still get the infection. That's the only way we are going to get to herd immunity, by the way, okay? And CDC said this in Jan. I said it in my interviews in Jan, knowing this virus and how it was spreading, that 70% of the world will be exposed to it within 2 years span. These are mathematical calculations. Now, if in lockdowns forever, that may take a very long time to happen. But gradually lockdowns are opening, gradually services are resuming, gradually we are all getting back to our practices. So there's no option, it's going to spread. And the people with normal immunity will also spread it to others. So be very careful with your own health. Still, even if you're fit, strong, you're a body.
I have one more question.
In India, still wear your mask, still do your hand washing, still do your hand sanitizing, still do all of those things.
Sir, when is the
One more
vaccine?
question coming up. A lot of people are asking this. So what exactly is the contact time with the virus? Or, what is the contact time?
So people have estimated this, interestingly, Anand, that if you spend 15 minutes with a person who is viral shedding, 15 minutes seems to be that critical time frame. Okay. Closed space. 15 minutes spent with someone who is shedding virus is believed to be enough. You have then had what would be called a high risk exposure. When the is less than 15 minutes, then it is considered to be a low risk exposure. Now, I won't simplify it that much because depending on the airflow, the ventilation, the precautions you're taking, all of those things matter. Okay. But more than 15 minutes spent with the person in close proximity. So less than 3 feet is close proximity, which I know in the dental profession, it's going to be less than that or in that, if not anything. So the kind of exposures you all would have in dentistry is going to be considered a high risk exposure.
All
I
our
have the
procedures
option.
are usually more than 15 minutes.
Yeah,
I
it's
know
more
that.
than-
I know that. That's why I'm saying you all are going to have high risk exposure. I said it out there. I have had enough dentist friends, and I've been to the dentist also, as most of us have some point in our lives. So I know the time that it takes. So it's between the aerosol, micro aerosol, all the drips, all the drill bits, all the fine aerosols, and the time you spend, y'all's exposure is high risk exposure.
So, sir, any
If
prophylactic
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sanyo ma'am has something. Yes.
yeah, sorry.
Sanyogita ma'am, please.
Sorry,
Yes.
sorry. Does any prophylactic medicines like antiviral, anti-malarial, antiviral, will work? Or if we take immunity boosters, so after that, how much after like 1 month of immunity booster drugs or so can we start practice, or we can just take them and start working? Just throw some light over it.
So what I'm going to say now is not in keeping with what the guidelines are in India. So please take it with a pinch of salt. It's coming from my personal opinion, experience, and reading and research. Practitioners in India and people who were potentially exposed or high risk were told to take hydroxychloroquine in a prophylactic manner. The data is very weak for it. I am yet to see a paper that has proven that it really works. And when hydroxychloroquine has been used in ill patients and sick patients, the studies that are available so far have not shown a very big difference. And the other thing that goes against it is if hydroxychloroquine was the answer, then rheumatology patients with lupus and other types of autoimmune disease who are taking hydroxychloroquine routinely and they're taking every day,
Yes,
prophylactic doses not every day, then they should have never got COVID-19 infection. But the reality is there have been enough rheumatologic patients who have got COVID-19 infections. So hydroxychloroquine is not the answer. If you ask me personally, Dr. Roy, are you taking hydroxychloroquine since you are practicing? My answer is no, I'm not. Okay? Take it with a pinch of salt with whatever it believes. Remember, Sayogita, and to everyone here and who's listening, placebos work 30 to 40% of the time in any clinical trial. So it is your faith and your belief. And remember, I do holistic medicine. I also conduct meditation programs. I work on the power of the mind. If you take hydroxychloroquine with belief that hydroxychloroquine is going to protect me, it will protect you to some extent. I don't know how much. There may be no science behind it, but you might with arsenic also. You may do that with your kada at home or your chavanprash at home, or you may do that with your prayer, yoga, and pranayam. It's your choice. Antibiotics, azithromycin, antivirals like let's say what was used early, they tried Tamiflu, influenza, thinking it will work, been shown to help. None of the prophylactic agents, the CDC right now does not have anything on its guideline or list. The ICMR and the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare have hydroxychloroquine. You want to take it, don't want to take it, it's a personal choice. But really, we don't have any preventive drugs. What is preventive, as I told you, is your immunity boosting. So if you have sleeping well, eating well, exercising well, taking your vitamins, minerals, if you don't take them, if you don't have a diet that's well balanced in it, if you're doing all these things, trust me, you can start practice tomorrow.
Okay.
A few days doing all of it and then start practice in a cautious, careful, conservative way.
Yes.
Right.
Got it, sir.
Okay.
I have one question in the continuity.
Sir, I had a please, Saurabh. Please, Saurabh. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Sir, is there any way where we can gauge the immunity of a person? I don't know, this questions may come out as a very lay question, but can we gauge an immunity of a person? And if we are going to it, so how should we go ahead it, sir? How can we go back?
So I think I answered this earlier. Was it Dr. Sayom? Sayogita,
Yes,
you
yes.
asked me, maybe you missed it, Saurabh, but there is no single test that can gauge a person's immunity. Our immune system is very wide and very complex. There's innate immunity,
Okay.
CBC, blood counts, CRP to know inflammation or infection, ferritin level, iron values, vitamin C, vitamin B12, all these things. There are labs with packages. This is not immune evaluation. This is general health evaluation. Karna can't be harmful, whatever benefit it carries. Going into specifically your humoral immunity, you will need an immunologist to help you guide that. Okay, there are ways in which we assess the humoral immune system. There are certain vaccine responses, certain antibody titers, things that we follow. Not recommended really for any and everyone, but if you're really keen and serious about your immunity, see an immunologist and get those things evaluated if you really think, because if you already have a track record of getting infections or problems or health issues, then definitely see an immunologist, because we have tests for cellular immunity, we have tests for humoral immunity, tests for what we call complement system of our immune system, we have tests for the innate immune system. So all of these things are there, but not in public or general domain. In the general domain, you'll get a CBC, you'll know your counts are fine. That's the most true probably in the immune system.
Right.
Can I ask, sir, uh,
So
people,
one second, I had a small doubt.
yeah.
Doubt coming from the audience. Dr. Kanchan Shetty was asking, is influenzam 200 milligrams a medicine from homeopathy effective to increase immunity against this virus?
So there are 6 to 7 medicines, Anand, that have been suggested by our homeopathy colleagues. Out of them, this is one of them. The ones that I have maximum knowledge, experience, second-hand experience, not first-hand experience from, have been album 30, whether in the pill form or the liquid form, have been with camphor, and have been with Rustox 200. There are 3-4 other in which influenzam is in the list, but these, I believe, are most commonly being used by homeopaths in these days, in these times. And of this, Ayush has opened that arsenic album 30 is the way to go, with a very specific dosage protocol. Doesn't have to be chronically taken. It's 4 days to begin with, and then 4 days a little while later. So I would stick to what most of the data and suggestions are from. If you go into the list, like if I went into just your home remedies now, I believe in tulsi, I believe in neem, I believe in haldi, I believe in so many different things. But can I tell you have all these things? No, in a proportion, in a way, in a value, in a combination, in a rotation. You'll have to figure out what you take. Don't go and take everything, because you don't want to overstimulate your immune system also. If you your immune system, you can then end up with autoimmune diseases and other problems. Remember that. So don't go easy on these things.
Okay.
Bharosa, I literally, in
Sushil
America,
sir, you had some doubts?
yeah.
No. I have few questions with me. And one question is from Dr. Aswatha Kumar Swami from Mumbai, and it is related with allergen. He asked, are allergen tests very accurate? And the second part to this question is, like antibiotic test, is there any POC, point of contact test for it?
Doctor, for both of these issues, so I am an allergist. I believe allergy tests are very, very accurate. You can call me biased because I spent my last 20 years practicing it. Dr. Sayogita can contact her if you do work.
I vouch for that.
And one of the biggest referrals I get from my dentist friends and community who know or don't know me, even from the unknown, is for drug testing, because you will get patients in your practice who say that a local anesthetic made me very sick.
Yeah.
I do local anesthetic
Yes.
testing at the point of care in my practice.
Yeah.
I do different antibiotics. There are protocols for it. Not the kind of protocol where you just inject it under the skin and see if it causes a reaction, because that's not the right way to test it. We as allergists have very specific protocols for drug allergy testing, and if that is negative, then we have specific protocols for oral challenges and even oral desensitization if we have to use a drug for which there is no other option. So recognizing all of that, allergy is a well-evolved field. not practiced that way in India by everyone. I must tell you, there is a lot of what I call quasi-allergy going on in India. Unfortunately, it's the truth. But real allergy is a very smart and evolved field, and in that, allergy testing is very accurate. Drug allergy testing is very accurate. At point of care, for you to do it by yourself, you would require training in allergy to do it. I don't think the way people do it, कि बाबा ये drug देने वाला है, check करके देख लेते हैं. That's
Yeah,
not to know the dilution. You need to know how to progress. There has to be sequential testing. All of that is something that an allergist can do. So seek the help of an allergist who understands all this if you really want to do it.
okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, sir. I can ask
We
one
did.
question, sir. Last.
Saurabh, you had some doubts.
Yeah.
I too have. Yeah. Go ahead, Saurabh.
Yeah, last
Saurabh,
question
you
from my
had some
side, then
doubts.
Dr. Sayogita can take over. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sir,
Yes,
flu vaccine.
Yes.
I personally am a sufferer from upper respiratory tract infections throughout the year chronically. So I was been advised by MD for a flu vaccine. So is any significance with the flu vaccine and with the COVID-2 any significance related with that, sir?
Okay. So firstly, Saurabh, come and see me once, because if you suffer from upper respiratory problems all year round, you may have allergies which have never been treated. And if your allergies are treated, I promise you that you can get better. And if you do immunotherapy, you may even get cured for a lifetime from those allergens. But we do desensitization.
My next text, yes, sir. My text message was to you next, sir, for an appointment.
Yeah. So coming to the influenza vaccination, it is something that is very, very relevant in these days. Look at the symptoms of influenza, okay? Fever, cold, body pain, cough, and if it gets very severe, pneumonia. What are the symptoms of COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2? Fever, body pain, myalgia, fatigue, tiredness happens in flu also. Cough or wet, mostly dry in COVID-19, can become wet also. I have enough cases I've handled where they have a wet cough later on. Nasal congestion, blockage, cold, fever, body pain, very similar symptoms, okay, and can go till pneumonia. So you really want to consider taking influenza vaccination. Is not perfect in young people. The efficacy is about 70%. In elderly, it drops down further. But something that everyone should consider taking, because come rainy, come monsoons, I vaccinate all my patients in my practice. At least I offer it to all of them, whether they take it or not is up to them.
Right.
But you want to, if you get these symptoms and you've taken the flu vaccine, you at least know you've tried to do something to protect yourself from a very similar bug that will start in July, circulating in the community very freely. It does every year. India has 2 flu seasons, one in monsoon, one in winter, or whatever winter we have. Even in Mumbai, it circulates very much. So I think that the influenza vaccination is relevant, important as healthcare practitioners. So, you know, in the US, the CDC recommends every live human being above the age of 6 months to take it every year. Upwards, har saal, everyone takes it, or at least suggested. Now, don't go into the anti-vaccine camp and all the people who believe that vaccines are bad and dangerous and all that. Judging them and not going into that path. If you believe in natural, I have natural also. You believe in modern medicine, I have modern medicine also. I do everything, and I do this with people around the world. But for those who are not doing enough on the natural and natural side, please do consider the vaccine. It's relevant, it's valid, it's important in these days.
Okay.
And
So,
you should take it, Saurabh.
Since we are on the topic of vaccines,
Yes.
how fast? So, since we are on the topic of vaccines, do we really expect a vaccine soon, or how fast can we expect it? And is there a vaccine actually which will be there? We have HIV for 35 years. We don't have a vaccine for it. Are we going to have a vaccine, to be very frank?
We had SARS in 2002, 2003. We still don't have a vaccine to it. We had MERS in 2011, 12. We still don't have a vaccine to it. Like you said, HIV, don't have a vaccine. Influenza, we have to make a new vaccine every 6 months, okay? Because the virus mutates.
Every year.
And I see news media reporting that India is going to have a vaccine by end of July. मैं बोलता हूँ, कहाँ गया यार science? What happened? How is it possible? So I read up on it. And what I find out is it is not a vaccine for SARS-CoV-2. It is a general vaccine for boosting your innate immunity, because it was used for gram-negative sepsis. So it is now going to be tried to see if it protects you from SARS-CoV-2. Kuch galat nahi hai, don't get me wrong. I'm a huge believer in microbial flora, microorganisms, how they boost and stimulate your immunity and all those things. But vaccine is very specific, okay? I'm going to here project against a slide right now. If you can get it on the screen, please.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
These are the 6 candidate vaccines that are still in phase 1 trial. Okay, phase 1 trial. Phase 2 होना बाकी है, phase 3 होना बाकी है, फिर public release. Phase 3 में most likely it will get released to a significant number of people if it's doing well in phase 1 and 2. But I don't see how a vaccine can come into the picture, a real vaccine that has gone through all the steps that we as immunologists like to see, can come anywhere before March of 2021. Okay, that's the earliest timeline, given that the first vaccine went into trial on March 16th, 2020. Ek saal to kam se kam 1 year it's going to take, and that too, trust me, every company comes out and says that we can do it, we have it, it's the best, it's going to work. There are 82 candidate vaccines that are being worked on, at least 80 plus. Don't go on the number specifically. But if you really look at all of these, vaccine development, and anyone who's in the field will tell you, is a gamble. Nothing short of a gamble. Because you assume that the target, you take the spike protein, or you take the nuclear protein, the nucleocapsid protein, the envelope protein, whatever you choose to take, you take the T cells that get stimulated, you take the B cells that get stimulated. It is a theory. When you start giving it to first animals, then humans, then seeing the response, and then those people getting exposed to the virus and showing that they can actually fight it off, the vaccines that have had the best track record have never been developed in anything short than 4 years that I know of. 4 years. Okay. So at this point of time, 1 year would be a miracle, because the whole world is working on it and billions of dollars have been invested into vaccines. So I can assume that things can be fast tracked and done. But a really good, well-tested vaccine will take some time. So the answer comes back again to what I've been harping, probably like a broken record. It's your immune system, it's your immune system, and it's you on that. That's really what you have to work on. Vaccine jab aayega, tab aayega. I will also be
had
there
one
to
more
take
question
it.
coming in from the crowd.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I have few questions. One is from Namrata
Yes, sir,
Arya.
I had one more question coming in from the crowd.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes,
One
sir.
of your.
Sushil, sir, please.
Yeah. This question is from Namrata Arya, and she asks, will meat and eggs consumption boost immunity?
Eggs and meat. Okay.
Amrita, I will give you an example. So the question basically is asking, does non-vegetarian eating vegetarian food boost the immunity?
Yeah.
Now, the largest living creature on land is an elephant. It has one of the best immune systems. It hardly ever gets sick, and it never touches meat or eggs. And if you take the largest water animal, which eats algae and maybe some plankton, the blue whale, which can go to the size of 100 elephants, is largely vegetarian. So anyone who says that you need to eat meat or eggs to be strong in your immunity is misled and misguided, because now even modern medicine accepts that non-vegetarian food actually increases a certain level of inflammation in the body. I am not making this up. You can look this data up. There is research on it. I am not against people who eat non-veg or meat. Eat it. It's your choice. You live in a free country and in a free world. You have every right to do it. But to say that if you don't eat meat or eggs, your immunity will be weak, that is a wrong statement. Also, people who are on a vegetarian diet may need supplements of vitamin B12 and certain other things that may not be hugely present in a vegetarian diet, but even those people, if they search enough and seek enough, they will find the vegetarian sources of those things. So certainly there is no such thing that you have to eat meat and eggs to boost your immunity. The answer is no.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sitesh. I hope, Dr. Amarta, you got your answer. And another question is from Dr. Akash Akinwar, and he asked about sooner or later at one majority of population is going to be infected with virus. So considering
Yes.
every patient walking in clinic as COVID positive patient, what and how we can prevent ourselves and staff? First question. Second
So,
is
this
Yeah.
this is petition. Please ask the person to go and see the earlier part of the presentation. Otherwise, we would be wasting precious time because we are getting close to it. Is already discussed in length of a dentist should do in their practice. Please see the earlier part of the presentation.
Okay. Another question is from Chetan Pathak, and he asks, Sir, Camphor 1M role is there any role of Camphor 1M in boosting immunity against COVID-19?
So as I said, the homeopaths believe in it. The homeopaths are distributing it. They are giving it to a lot of their patients. They have also done public distribution. So absolutely, if you have a belief and a faith structure that believes in homeopathy, then that can be considered. It's among the top 3 suggested drugs in homeopathy between arsenic, camphor, and Rustox 200, as I said. So can be considered for who wants to take it.
Thank you.
There is no published data on all of
I
these
feel
things. I
maybe
must say
right at
again,
the
there is
end,
no
you can
literature
give
like
us
double-blind, placebo-controlled trials are not there on these things. These are from alternative systems, so take it with your own background work and in the right dosing on your own thing.
Sure. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Dr. Anand or
I
Dr.
think so,
Sujata?
right at the end, when we are about to close, I think, thanks a lot, sir. So, Dr. Sitesh, sir, what I feel is maybe right at the end, when we are about to close, it would be nice if you could give us, a point-wise thing about how to boost your immunity and any supplements that we should be taking, or, something like that, something which gives us enough structure right at the end, something which gives us, okay, take this, don't take this, you don't need this, something like that would be very good.
Okay.
Anand, what you're asking
And
me is a very
I have
tough
one
thing.
question, sir, coming in from the
You're asking me to summarize my entire life and career in 10 or 12 points. I want you to understand immunity is not one thing. I already projected that slide, diet, lifestyle, sleep, exercise, sunlight, fresh air, vitamin D supplement. I told you 2000 international units per day, zinc about 20 to 50 milligrams per day, not more than that. Vitamin C, 500 milligrams per day, not more than that. If you believe in homeopathy, if you believe in Ayurveda, I myself am drinking 3 herbal teas every day. I have my own special herbal teas and my own special drops that I put in it. Sayugita knows about them.
Yes. Yeah.
Contact me if you want specific guidance. General guidance I've already given in the presentation. You can run with it. You will be better off than most of the world will be if you just follow what I've told you.
I have a question, sir.
Yes, please.
There's a question from the
Yes,
crowd as
please.
well from Neelam Zadav Panaye. What extra care an asthmatic and allergic patient should take care? Like influenza vaccine, as you said, that should be taken beforehand, before we start our practice, because June, July is also coming. And anything else should be done for an asthmatic patient because they are more susceptible to this COVID-19, right?
When I do telemedicine or when I see my patients for follow-up in my clinic, this is the top question that I get. Sayugita, I get it, I don't know, probably 5 to 10 times every day. The first thing that people with allergies and asthma need to do is they should not stop their routine medicine. So if they are on inhalers, they are on what we call dry powder inhalers or metered dose inhalers. If they are on certain tablets that are meant to be taken for their allergies or their asthma, they should not stop it. Stopping the drugs is a very bad idea. Even if you read that somebody somewhere said that steroids are contraindicated in COVID-19, that's not true. It's all changing and coming back now. And inhaled steroids are not oral steroids. So inhaled steroids are very, very safe and should be continued, because if the asthma or the allergy goes out of control, because someone stopped their drugs, then they will be in more trouble if they catch the SARS-CoV-2 and get a COVID-19 infection than they would be if they had well-controlled allergy and asthma and they were taking all their medicines properly. That's the first point. Second point, everything that I said about doing exercise, doing yoga, doing pranayama, doing breathing exercises, eating a healthy, fresh diet, all those apply to people with allergies, asthma, heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, immunocompromised states, kidney problems, liver problems, everyone it applies to, because they do happen to be in a slightly higher risk group than other people. Though there are also, interestingly, some studies coming up that are saying that people with allergies may be at less risk for getting COVID-19 than people with.
Yes.
It's a very interesting, it's very early preliminary data. We don't know for sure, but and even people with COPD have a higher risk than people with asthma do with this infection. So certainly things that can be done and precautions that can be taken, and they should still use their mask, do their hand washing, do their hand sanitizing, do their physical distancing. All those things are still very important, and keeping their environment area cleaned, sanitized, all those things is just as important for people with allergies and asthma as it is for anyone else. And taking the flu vaccine.
Yes. So, okay. Anand, you want to go ahead?
Dr. Sanyogita, any more questions? Yeah, you have any more questions? I have a question for sir.
Yes.
You have practiced in the U and you have practiced in India. So you have seen both the countries for a good amount of time. I guess you are in India now since 2011, right?
Correct.
So there have been some reports which have been coming in that the mortality rate in India is not that high. Maybe because we have had the BCG vaccine, or maybe we are exposed to so many allergens or, you know, organisms or what, I don't know what. But is there something credible in it? Is it relevant? Is it right? What is your take on it?
So if you can just project the slide that I have put on the screen. This is yesterday. In India, there have been about 86,000 cases, about 2,700 deaths, 35% have recovered. The number of tests done and the positivity rate of the test is somewhere around 3.6%. And also, if you look at the mortality rate, it is 3.2%. The average around the world is between 2 and 3%. The very high ones were in Italy and Spain at 9 and 11%, but even that has come down in those areas now. US has been running a steady about 6%. So people think that you look at the mortality as the ultimate answer. Okay, like if there are not as many people dying, that means we are doing good. To some extent, I also agree with that, and I believe that's the ultimate answer. But that doesn't mean that we have less cases, or it doesn't mean that we are more immune to it. BCG vaccination is a theory that is being studied, because BCG vaccination largely works through T cell, the cellular immunity of the body. And cellular immunity is very, very important for SARS-CoV-2 also, because it orchestrates which cytotoxic cells will be formed, which antibodies producing cells will be stimulated. I would tell you, between getting BCG and a significant proportion of Indians having what I would call latent tuberculosis, so their immune system is keeping tuberculosis in check in their bodies, and they don't have any symptoms, so they would never know they have it. This could potentially be stimulating the immune system. Yeah, it could be doing it, but is it enough to bank on it? The answer is no. I would say that number of other viral infections that we get coronaviruses a couple of times a year with change of season, we get influenza, para-influenza, we get common cold, rhinovirus. The more infections you get, the more your immunity will be, बोलते हैं ना कि उसको धार लगा के रखा है, वो तैयार है चीजों से फाइट करने के लिए, बराबर? So people may think that way, that okay, we as Indians are exposed to more infections, so our immunity is better. I pray for every single Indian that is true. I pray for my whole country and this world that is true, that they don't get as many infections, so a new virus is more deadly to them than we getting lots of infections here due to our 1.3 billion people who live in this beautiful country. And if that is what is saving our lives and protecting us, God bless us all, save us all. I am with it. At this point of time, I would not tell people to go and get a booster of the BCG and wo Australia wo sab kar raha hai. Australia trials are going on with BCG vaccination. vaccination to see if it helps.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Dr. Sanyogita, you have any question?
no.
Or I guess we can let sir go. We have
Wait,
already
I need
taken
to
up a
close.
lot of
Yeah,
his time.
yeah. So,
Yes.
Dr.
sir,
Sanyogita.
sir, I've been knowing
Yes.
knowing you since around 2011 or so, till the time you came to India. I'd been a patient of Dr. Nefardkar since 2005, and then you came when he was no more. So I was always in a dilemma whether I am in a person with the right person, because Dr. Nefardkar also used to promote pranayam, and every time I used to go to him and he used to say कि नहीं तुमको योगा क्यों नहीं करते, तुम प्राणायाम नहीं करते. That's why coming back to me. But then when I met you, yes, I knew that I was in the right
I guess
hand.
we have internet
And
issues with everyone now.
yeah. So,
Am I
sir,
audible, Saurabh?
yes, Anand, you are audible.
Yeah, Sanyogita is back.
Yeah. Go
Sanyogita,
ahead.
yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. So to summarize for today's things, what I have understood that we have to coexist with this virus, right? Your own immunity is the only thing which will fight for it. And for fighting, you require additional supplements like vitamin E, D, B complex, a proper lifestyle. Your gut has to be good, like eating habits and everything. You can go with immuno boosters of homeopathy or Ayurvedic, and the immuno boosters what you provide as well, which we are taking as well, and vaccines of influenza before we start our practices. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you've summarized it
Yes.
very, very well. And what I will tell you is understand one thing. I want to leave you all with this concept, okay? When SARS happened in 2002, 2003, this is my closing statement. People in China actually went into very remote places, into the mountains where these bats live, where the horseshoe bats and all the other bats live. And they started checking these bats for coronaviruses. And don't take it lightly. There are 500 coronaviruses that have been isolated from bats.
Oh.
You would think that if coronaviruses were so dangerous, the entire bat population should have been wiped out by now, correct?
True, sir.
The virus wants to coexist. When we damage its habitat, when we damage its host, then it jumps and comes and it finds a very wide and prevalent 7.8 billion people to infect. The virus jumped and became very happy. The virus will eventually coexist, like you rightly said. And the work here is that we have to change our ways, our life, our carbon footprint on this planet. We have to change everything so that we create a circumstance in which we can coexist, and the virus will be like any other common cold that has been there around us, and we don't have to worry about it. And that really is the final, besides everything that you said. And you mentioned vitamin E. There are not too many data on vitamin E. Most of the data has been on vitamin D, zinc, and vitamin C. Okay.
See, I said
On,
yeah.
I don't want anyone to go with that as a summary statement. Correct.
Yes.
Not wrong. Vitamin E has its benefits, but it's not one of the primary immune boosting. It has other benefits in the liver and other areas of the body. So
there was
yes.
one question from the crowd from Amit Tipnis. Ki sir, is reduced oxygen saturation level a first sign of
It's a late
symptomatic?
sign.
It's a late sign. Symptomatic carrier.
Yeah, by the time the oxygen level starts dropping, generally the patient, so people talk about what is this called happy hypoxia. Happy means I have myself also treated some people whose oxygen level is 71 or 72. Now, normally if someone has an oxygen level of 71 or 72, they are gasping for breath, they are restless, they are sweating, they are very uncomfortable, they are very unhappy. The reality is that these people don't seem that problemed. They're automatic. They get into trouble when they try to speak. They don't have any reserve even to talk, or they have a problem when they try to walk even to their own bathroom or around their house. They become breathless. So hypoxia without breathlessness or cough is, to my experience, unheard of.
Okay. Okay.
So hypoxia is a late sign. The person has already gone into moderate, possibly into severe by the time they become hypoxic. But if you wanted to screen people in your practice, I know why this person is asking this. Possibly is they are wondering if anyone who comes in, you do an infrared thermometer check, get their temperature,
That-
and then do a pulse oximeter to know.
Pulse oximeter. Yes.
Hypoxic due to cardiac reasons. You can get hypoxic due to COPD. You can get hypoxic due to interstitial lung disease. But yes, if someone is hiding the history from you, they are not telling you that they are having problems, then checking the pulse oximetry may be one of the ways to detect it. So this is a very interesting question and something that can be looked at from that angle.
Okay. Okay. Got it,
Okay.
sir. Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess we are done here for now. Thanks a lot, Dr. Sitesh Roy. I have one thing
Yeah.
to tell you. I last met you like 8 years back, and you are exactly the same. Age doesn't seem
Yes.
to affect you a bit.
It's
Age
all my
has no
natural
effect on you.
therapies, Anand, my natural therapies, and all my belief in meditation and healing and ancient therapies. Come do my seminars. I conduct meditation seminars. They're called Happy Living, Healthy Living. I do them for doctors and dentists also. We can create a group
Wow.
and we can do that. That's
Yes.
my secret to what I do. Means I did not stop. I did it in a very sparse way, but I never stopped practicing all through this also because I believe that if you take care of yourself, your immune and your body takes care of you. So absolutely, I appreciate
Thank you,
the you said, but I give all the credit to all my other team members. I have a very extensive team of naturopaths, of holistic healers, of Ayurveda areas, of many other people that I work with, because I truly believe that our country is the cradle of healing and health for the whole world. And I think practitioner, including dentists, you are also very much doctors and practitioners, need to become aware of what we have here because this is the secret. People in India used to live till 100, 200 years. It was nothing. Till hard couple of 100 years ago, people would live 100-150 साल जीते थे लोग यहाँ पे.
Very truly said, sir. I guess the moment the government allows me to travel, I'm coming to you. And we might host you again for some wonderful session like this. You
Certainly,
are a
certainly.
textbook in yourself. You are a textbook in yourself. It was an
Very truly
amazing
said,
session.
Anna. Very. Yes.
You are a
Yes.
textbook in yourself. I am, we are all mesmerized. We have had numerous comments saying that this is the best session that we have till now. And trust me,
Wow.
we had like 50,
Wow.
55, 60 webinars till now. So it was an amazing session. It was a much needed session. It was something that, was something that we need to address right now because this is our first line of defense and maybe it is our only line of defense.
The
So we
only
really
line of
needed to
defense.
address
Only
this.
line of
Only
defense.
line.
Maybe not
Very
just first.
true,
It
true,
is our only
true.
line of defense. So, we really needed to address this and you have put it across very nicely. Thanks a lot, sir, for accepting the invitation and for giving us your time. We have overshot by a long. We had thought about an hour and we are already into
Lot.
2 hours. So it was amazing. Thanks a lot,
Thank you
everyone.
very
Thanks a
much.
lot, Dr.
Thank you,
Sayogita,
sir.
for helping us organize this. Thank a lot, Dr. Saurabh. Thank a lot, Dr. Sushil, sir, for joining in. I have a
Thank
few
you.
announcements to make. Before we break it, I have a few announcements to break. A very, very big thanks to Dr. Rajiv Verma, sir, who has been another superstar on our forum and he hosted a
Yes.
beautiful session today. He again takes you to another level. He
Another
takes you to
level.
another
Another
planet.
level.
Yeah,
Yes.
he takes you to some
Yes.
other world altogether with his talks and he is amazing. So he is the superstar and the blockbuster of dentistry and of our forum and we are very, very happy and honored to have him with us. Thanks a lot, Dr. Sitesh, sir. I am gonna be behind you to get you back again. So you will see me pestering you. I'll
Your
be
wish is my
pestering you a lot.
command. Your wish
Yes,
is my
for sure.
command.
And
Thank you, Dr.
I
Sitesh.
have a few announcements. We have Dr.
Thank you very much.
Thank
we
you.
have Dr. Martin Trope who will be coming down for a panel discussion and a live lecture on
Yeah.
vital pulse therapy on Saturday night at 9:30 p.m. So please make sure you all join us. We'll have a group of panelists. We are getting the best of best people from India to join us as the panelists. So make sure you come and have fun and enjoy that session. A lot of learning there. We have Dr. Rajiv Chitgupi, sir, who is joining us on this Friday. And he's going to be actually talking very specific research-based, evidence-based procedures and protocols that we have to follow in our dental clinics so as to, try and avoid getting infected and, make sure everyone in our clinic is safe. The patient, you, me, and the assistant. So everyone has to be safe. So Rajiv Chitgupi sir is going to be talking very vividly on it. And before that, we have Dr. Aslam Inamdar, who is coming up with a very, very inspirational session, who's going to be talking about his journey from what he was and what he is right now. And he's going to walk through the entire digital dentistry. So make sure you join us on this Wednesday with Dr. Aslam. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Dr. Sanyogita. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.